Tally-ho! Torn Banner Studio is back again with Chivalry 2, and it's exactly the gore-filled slapstick medieval bloodbath we were waiting for. But if you want to make the most of your honourable escapades for king and country, you might want to axe some of those graphic settings before you axe your enemies. I'm Katie Wickens, hardware editor at PC Gamer, and I'm here to help you retain some of the realism of your medieval battle simulation fantasies without sacrificing your frame rates. There's no built-in benchmark in Chivalry 2, so for a whole week of my life I relived the Siege of Rudhelm all day, every day, so you could get an idea of how to approach the graphic settings most effectively. There was one issue with this process in that each run was inevitably a little different. Playing in offline mode meant I was subject to the whim of the bots, which are basically potato levels of intelligence, so it was difficult to match the events every time. First are 3 test rig PCs. We also tested on our mainstream and high-end MSI gaming laptops. For each configuration, I first went through and checked what resolutions they could handle on the Epic graphics preset with VSync off and resolution scale set to 100. I tested both laptops at their native resolution of 1080p, and both managed to deliver a smooth experience. The high-end $3,000 MSI Raider GE76's RTX 3070 managed to average a solid 88 FPS. That's likely to translate up in the case of a desktop variant, but these aren't terrible scores if you're looking to do some mobile gaming. With the $1,000 MSI GF65 Thins GTX 1660 Ti, I managed to get a 58 FPS average with 1% lows of 44 FPS. Not the greatest, but with some tweaking, which we'll come to later, it's possible to bolster these scores. It does go to show though that you might not need to remortgage your home to get a nice frame rate with Chivalry 2 on a mobile device. On to the desktop rigs, and ripping through the frames like a knight in shining armour, our high-end rig wasn't phased even at 4K. You're looking at 130 FPS averages even at ultra high definition. That means anyone lucky enough to have a flagship RTX 3080 should have no issues running the game, but as we all know, a multiplayer game could always use more frames. The mid-range machine's RTX 3060 Ti gave up some awesome numbers at lower resolutions, and even managed an 82 FPS average at 4K, with no signs of frame drop. Again, this may be a different case in the chaos of multiplayer, but there are some easy fixes to push those frame rates up if you're struggling. Speaking of struggling, our budget machine actually performed rather admirably at lower resolutions, but it slipped into unplayable territory when faced with the perilous 4K. 29 FPS averages are not fun in an up-close battle, and I'd hate to think how scary it would be in multiplayer mode. Tuning your resolution back to 1080p with a machine like this might mean a 94 FPS average, but lower resolutions don't tend to do games like this justice. But wait, there is hope. While a GeForce 1650 Super or older is going to get pretty clunky in ultra high definition, the devs at Torn Banner have made sure even the budget gamers among us have a fighting chance. The setting tweaks that delivered a decent boost to frame rates were effect quality, shadow quality, and DX12 VRS. The rest had a surprisingly minimal impact on performance, and so aren't worth dialing back. When it comes to shadows, however, my advice is this: leave shadow quality high. Switching shadow quality down to low will result in up to 12% higher frame rates, but it can end up making the game look strangely cartoony. Shadow rendering can be demanding on your hardware, but also has a big impact on how game world looks. Only turn it down if you're really struggling for frames. But feel free to turn down the view distance. This affects how far away the game will draw fully detailed environments, and when you're on foot, with a pole staff being jammed in your face, you're not going to worry about some trees being rendered way behind your assailant. Knocking view distance down to low only netted another 5% bump in performance, but the drop in visual fidelity is only really noticeable if you're speeding around the battlefield like a madman on horseback. If you're moving at speed, there's a chance you'll see some scenery popping into existence, which can be a little jarring. Effect quality had the greatest single impact on performance in our testing, but if I'm honest, knocking that down to low has a negligible effect on the game's fidelity. At least when you're actually playing, anyway. In our testing, changing the effect quality only affected fire particles of the pyres around the battlefield. And while it does look more realistic on Epic, turning it to low gave us a pretty significant 13% boost to our frame rates. Unless you're staring at fire pits instead of fighting, you're unlikely to notice the visual difference. But if you're getting patchy performance, you will notice the improvement. Something you should definitely consider turning on, and you'll need to restart the game in order to do this, is DirectX 12 and VRS. Variable Rate Shading, or VRS, allows the developer to change a game's shading rate to varying degrees. If there's a big stretch of the battlefield that doesn't change, VRS allows a game to lower the shading rate of that area and boost performance because the GPU has to do less work. There are 2 tiers of VRS, and because of the 10% performance bump, it looks like it might be using the more granular version of the effect. The setting in Chivalry 2 might be in beta right now, but it's definitely worth enabling from our testing. Avoid the specific VRS camera setting, however, because it dropped our frame rates by 23%. Ouch. We've been in contact with the developers to try to get to the bottom of exactly why that happens, but for now we recommend ignoring it entirely. But there is an alternative to turning down graphic settings. The devs have actually made a superb attempt at implementing resolution scaling. Should you be packing a 4K panel, but a graphics card that struggles at that resolution, you can always let the resolution scale setting slip down by 50%. By using temporal anti-aliasing, also known as TAA, also known as temporal magic, according to the devs, Chivalry 2's downscaling is difficult to spot. It's even more effective than simply running the game at a lower resolution, as it still renders the UI in the native resolution, which helps to keep it looking great. We've rerun native 4K and downscaled battles, and we genuinely can't tell the difference in visual fidelity, despite it effectively running at more like 1440p. You will spot the performance difference, however, as by giving scaled res and TAA a chance to do their thing, you're looking at somewhere between 70 and 100% performance boosts. Honestly, if you can tell which is which, I will eat my halberd. Granted, it's not the most beautiful game ever made, but the charm of Chivalry 2 comes from those intricate, realistic graphics juxtaposed against the slapstick joy of watching a ragdoll corpse hurled across the battlefield. As I've said, a multiplayer game could always use more frames, so even if you're happy with the performance you're getting, it's worth a few minor tweaks just in case. You wouldn't want to be caught out by the bane of frame drop when the battle heats up to a crescendo. For a more in-depth analysis, check out the best settings for Chivalry 2 article over on PCGamer.com, and thanks for watching.